You've met Bob. Now meet Bob's alter ego. This is Incredible Bob. He's a superhero. But right now he's not so super because he doesn't have any joints. So we're gonna help Bob out here and give him some joints so that he can go off and fight crime. First off, we're gonna start with the shoulder. Let me pull this out so we have access to his body. Excuse me, Bob. Mr. Incredible, sir, I should say. And bring out a sphere because we need to do some surgery. He has these placeholders for joints. But if we're going to give him real joints, then he needs to lose those extra bits. You've probably noticed I'm a chronic clicker, constantly making adjustments rapidly. So I'm clicking a lot. I don't know if that's a bad thing. Scale it down some more. It's hard to find a happy medium there, but we're giving it a shot. And I'm going to align those. Okay, align it down the middle here and the middle here, but not there. Obviously, we don't want to bring them together. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate that. And drag it out to be longer, and then drag this out to be shorter. To a uniform scale from the center. Since that's already lined up. Okay, then I need to make that joint like that. See how that works? Okay, so I'm going to group all three of these. And then I'm going to slide that into the socket. Pretty close. Not all the way, but pretty close. Okay, and like with the toy truck wheel, we need to cut this shape out. So we need a negative space inside of the body. So I'm going to duplicate. Click hole, and then group it with the body. Fantastic. So there we've made a captured post joint. There we go. So now I can group these. And I have my two halves. Looks like I could have done a better job lining those up, but it's not too late. That looks good. Now, not done just yet. We're going to design a screw to go in here. But before we do that, we need to cut out some of this cylinder to make room for this half of the sphere. So I'm going to duplicate that part, turn it into a hole, and group it with the cylinder down there. I'll group it with the front half of the hinge, actually. And then I'm going to reverse the process for the side one. So I'm going to duplicate the bottom half of the hinge, turn it into a hole, and then group it with the side. All right. You'll see how that goes when I pull these two apart. So you see, let me return the work plane to its normal. There's a bit of a cup now inside of that cylinder to make room for this half of the two. Okay, so here we see a combination post and half hinge. Now it has a post down here, but we're not going to use that post as a post, if that makes sense. What I'm going to do is move the arm into position. And first cut off the stand-in joint there, bringing out a box to use as a hole. And I like to try to make it so that the things I use as cutting tools aren't oversized for what I need. I find that when it comes time to go back and make changes and you end up ungrouping a lot of things, it's best not to have really enormous holes shapes. So skipping the elbow joint, which is just going to be another half hinge, we're going to move on to the ball joint now. And so I'm going to bring in a box. This is going to end up being a hole, so I might as well turn it into one right now. And bring it up. We're going to cut off the bottom of this arm, make room for the joint. Okay. That looks about right. Okay, do that again for... Actually, since I was right there, let me ungroup that and just duplicate this. Always look for ways to make things faster. All right, so we've got nice clean places to work. First thing I'm going to do is model the ball for the pin, the pin and the ball for the ball joint. So I'm going to need a cylinder. It's very much smaller than that one. .8 is what I wind up with. And gonna need a sphere. And shrink that down to be 2 millimeters or so. and align that in those two directions so that it's all lined up, and then group it. Actually, change it to blue. There we go. That's nice and visible. All right, so its position is going to end up being inside of that hand like so. That's about the right spot for it. Now we're going to need a wrist. So bring in a cylinder, size it to be about the same size as the bottom of the arm there, and bring that down to where it will be. If they're not lined up, let's take the opportunity to do so. Things tend to work better when you pay attention to alignment. Okay, with ball joints, you have to leave a little bit of room. There has to be a little bit of space between the wrist and the hand in this case. I'm going to duplicate that shape and use it as the source for the shape that I need to have inside of my wrist. Now, looking at this, I see that the wrist is a little bit small for that size ball. We're going to have to make it bigger. Just no choice. Okay. That should work out.
It's 1 o'clock.
Now I'm going to show you the shape that is pretty much standard. You're going to need for pretty much any ball joint type thing you're going to want to make. So I'm bringing a cylinder that is the same diameter as the ball. I think we were down at 2, just a little over 2. Okay, line those up. Okay, good. And that's going to sit on the top of the sphere. Okay, group that. It's important that that's right, so I think I need to shrink that down to 2.1. 2.0 is too small. Two 2.1 is just right. Okay, and as we said, we got to get that lined up so that it's the top of the sphere. Group those together. Turn that back to blue. Now the next shape you're going to need to add is the cone. Okay. Let's bring you way down. And then align those. That's great. And group that. Now you could take off the pin if you wanted to, but this with the cone and then the sphere and then the cylinder on the top, arranged just like that, is the shape that you're almost always going to need. It's a reliable recipe for making the inside of the wrist shape. Now, the last key part of this is to make a way for the arm to be glued into a certain spot on the wrist. So that means we're going to need to add something to the arm, and a matching shape is going to need to be a hole in the wrist. So it needs to be larger than that inside hole for the pin, or for the ball. Okay. I'll line that. And push it down into the wrist a little bit. Duplicate it. Turn it into a hole. Group. And there's that. Now we can put it, this remaining shape, into the arm where we would like that wrist positioned. Perfect. Now let's group that. Give him back his heroic uniform colors. And as a final thing, looks like I have an extra hand. As a final step here, I'm going to put that hole back in there for the pin. I don't actually have to, the modeling of the pin isn't essential, but having a hole there is. So you could probably tell from the sizes I've been working with here that these parts are very small. And I wouldn't recommend, if you're going to do 3D printing, I wouldn't recommend just yet really working at this size for some of these parts. This hand and this wrist are that's probably pushing the limits of what printers are capable of doing. But even if you scale it up a little bit, the weak point is still going to be, what do you use as a ball and pin in a ball joint that isn't going to snap off? So clearly we can't use plastic, especially 3D printed plastic, because that's just not strong enough at these sizes. So here is what I would suggest. So have you seen these? These are pins used in sewing, and these have just about the right size balls, and they have pins on them that are metal. So, the most sturdy thing you could have, and they come in different sizes and even different colors. So if you wanted to match the the color of the plastic on the ball to your model, then that would be no problem at all. So model with one of these pins in mind, and you can always cut it off and make it shorter. And you'll have an easy source for a ball for the ball joints in your action figure models. So Bob has a couple of joints here, and all it would take is going through and doing pretty much the same thing for the rest of the joints, using post and half hinge and ball joints. Remember, you can combine these in a shape like that and give him a whole range of motion. All right, I think Bob's happy with that. And so am I. See you next time.